our time is very limited. We move to the next session. It's very important session. Before to move to the next session, let me tell you something that maybe is going on for Server Learning Center, which is crowdfunding is already there started for 6 refugee-led organization. They want to support 6 refugee-led organizations, including the UCC, in this fundraising. I request to Muzaffar to post in the chat box if someone wants to donate a little bit for the refugees initiatives. We would like to appreciate you now also. And let me invite someone is very important. Someone is friend of refugees. He just took resettlement in USA also before, because he is very friend with refugees. I was forgot that he is not refugees. Really, he is very important. Someone is help us, especially for BCC a lot, and he guide us a lot for BCC, and BCC bring to the next level. Tembal, stage is yours. I don't want to say anything more.
Thank you so much, Bakir. I appreciate it. It's really a pleasure to be here. It's true, I'm in New York at the moment, and it's quite late at night, so I apologize in advance if I start falling asleep or slurring my words over here, but it's such a pleasure to be on this World Refugee Day celebration with so many familiar faces, and the majority of those faces being refugees. And people who have worked together to build a movement that I think has really grown out of Asia Pacific that we haven't seen anywhere in the world before. And that movement is demonstrated, I think, very effectively, and I'm really proud to see it through perhaps the election of Hafsar as the chair of the Asia Pacific Refugee Rights Network. Hafsar, I haven't had a chance to congratulate you in person, but it's really an excellent development. And I'm so pleased to know that the organization that I was heading up over the last 2.5 or 3 years now has you as the chair. I think that we'll all benefit from that. But I also want to point out, you know, I mean, Hafsar mentioned at the beginning the legal status issue and the question of the 1967 protocol and the 1951 convention, and a rights-based approach to refugee protection and identifying the rights of refugees under law and how we can move forward through that, through a global civil rights movement for refugees, which is something I think is really important. But the other thing that's on this call, and that's the background that I have, but the other element that I think we've already heard a lot about on this call that I think is equally as important is refugees supporting refugees at the ground level. And we've seen that with Muzaffar in the first half, talking about the establishment of Cisarua School for refugees, an unbelievable initiative. And not only the establishment of Cisarua, but then using Cisarua to support Bakir in Bangkok, from Indonesia to Thailand, to support refugee-led schools and promote that sort of on-the-ground support to people across borders. And so I'm really pleased, and that's only a few. So I'm really pleased to see so many people working so hard here in this call. I also want to greet my former colleagues and good friends from Apron. So thank you so much for being here and helping to sponsor this event. We have about an hour left, and we're moving into a panel discussion. And Bakir and I had a talk earlier today for me in New York, but yesterday for Bakir about how to progress this. And we've discussed over the course of the last couple of weeks in planning World Refugee Day a number of elements that he had hoped that I would touch on. I think that it's interesting to see the development of World Refugee Day, refugee-led World Refugee Day celebrations. The first World Refugee Day was in 2001. It was declared an international day by the UN in 2000. It had been called Africa Refugee Day before that. So it's, World Refugee Day is a fairly new phenomenon, but in terms of refugee, the history of the refugee regime. But refugee-led World Refugee Day events are very new. And the first in Bangkok was last year, and it was run by BUCC, by Bakir. And it was a great success, I thought. So it's interesting to see the progression into this year and the type of approach that Bakir had envisioned with BUCC and the questions that he had asked me to try to work around. I won't get into the details of those questions, except to say that they're aimed to focus on the diversity of the experience of refugees, not only in terms of the reasons for flight, and we've heard some of those, but also in terms of what it's like to be in exile as a single person, what it's like to be in exile with a family, what it's like to be in exile as a woman or as a gender variant person, what it's like to be in exile as a single man. That type of thing. We've heard a little bit about people's resettlement experience earlier in the call, so I won't get into that too much. But we do have 5 panelists. I'm going to quickly summarize some bios, but I'd hope that each of you will also introduce yourselves as we get into the questions. But the first is Halima Aklawi, the manager of Cisarua Refugee Learning Center, which I've mentioned, the refugee-run school in Indonesia. She's Hazara from Afghanistan, but was born in Iran in 1989, and became a refugee after leaving Afghanistan. I will, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip a number of the details, but please, Halima, feel free to fill people in a little bit more about your experience if you would like. Haiso Tako, a friend and colleague. I've been on a number of panels with you, Haiso, and been in events in Bangkok. It's good to see you as well. He's been working with the refugee community and community-based organizations along the Thai-Burma border for the last 20 years, and is now serving as the Education and Livelihood Coordinator at the Karen Refugee Committee, and is the current chair of the Karen Peace Support Network and the steering committee of the Asia Pacific Network of Refugees. Lutfullah Baha is from Afghanistan as well, 33 years old, and has a family of 5. With three children, and he's a legal graduate from the Faculty of Law in Kabul, Afghanistan, and he's worked for the Roshan Communication Company for 8 years in Kabul. He had to flee and is now living in Thailand. He's been a refugee since 2019. Again, Lutfullah, if you would like to elaborate on that, you are certainly welcome to do so. Zishan Joseph, another friend of mine and colleague, is from Pakistan, a refugee living in Thailand since 2013. He's served as a human rights activist and spokesperson in Afghanistan to protect the rights of minorities. He's now in Thailand, and he's had an opportunity to serve in different social organizations there. And Asadullah Amiri is a refugee in Indonesia. He's been in Indonesia since 2013, born in Afghanistan and fled the country due to persecution based in the war there. He's in Indonesia for almost 10 years. He's been waiting for onward movement of some sort or some sort of solution, but has maintained his time as a volunteer teacher for refugee children and a computer teacher for elder refugees in Indonesia. So I'd like to welcome all of you. It's really a pleasure to have you part of this call. And I do not want to speak much longer at all because as Bakir said, I am not a refugee, and I think this is really something that we should be focusing on the refugee experience. What I will say is that we do hope that those of you, refugees and otherwise, who would like to ask questions of the panelists, to please do so. You can either raise your hand and we'll let you ask in person, or if you feel more comfortable, you can put it in the chat. Please know that security concerns are always important around people who've had to flee. So if it is something that you would like to keep confidential, note that. and we can be sure that that happens. But without further ado, I'd like to say thank you to the panelists. I will start. I'll combine introductions with the first question. So please, when you feel like answering the question, also if you feel like just saying a few words, that would be great. But the first question is this: refugees share many common experiences, particularly in terms of the challenges and access to protection and livelihood. Every refugee also has their own unique exposure to those challenges and to the opportunities that might arise in exile. And I'm wondering if each of you would be able to reflect just for a few minutes on what you believe the most important things are that other refugees should know about the experience that you've had, and why these experiences are important for other refugees to know. I know oftentimes NGOs will come and ask refugees for their stories, what do they think, you know, NGOs should know, but making these connections across borders between refugees, I think is really interesting to me at least, and I hope to all of you. So perhaps we could start with Halima, if you wouldn't mind just saying a few words about your own unique experience and what you think that the people on the call might really value in that.
Thank you so much. Hello to everyone. It's my pleasure to be a part of this webinar. Thank you, Themba, for introduction. My name is Halima Akhlaqi. I'm Hazara refugee from Afghanistan, but I was born in Iran and I grown up in Iran. I'm graduated in literature from University Mashhad, Iran. And it's almost 7 years that I live in Indonesia. I share the same experience with Muzaffar. I work for Cisarwa Refugee Learning Center, a school that is established by refugees and has been operating for 7 years now. When I was a refugee in Iran, I was working as a teacher for a school that was established for refugees. So for the past 11 years, I'm working in education area. And the school that was in Iran was for the refugees, Afghan migrants or refugees who live in Iran, and for any reason they lost their document and they can't go to government school. We were trying to provide education for the people who have been in the same condition as us. In my first week, when I arrived to Indonesia, I saw the school, I saw CRLC gate door, and it wasn't like a surprise for myself, as I had something similar in the past. But seeing the door and some Persian and English words on the gate door was very promising for myself. I felt very hopeful about having this opportunity in Indonesia here. And I'm sure that the other refugees, especially for the ones who have children in school age, they feel the same. People here in Cisarwa, it's not, even though the first idea was for the children, providing education for the children, but CRLC is not only for the children. We have students in different ages, young children, young people, elderly people, men and women, they all come to school, they meet each other, make friends, communicate, study, and enjoy all at the same time. Beside that, for the volunteer teachers, who all of them are also refugees, working in the school is something rewarding. They teach and serve the community, and they also learn from working with the community. I, as a teacher, as a volunteer person who work for CRLC, I saw that as a very positive experience for myself. We in Cisarwa and other initiatives in Cisarwa, we didn't wait for UNHCR or other organization to do something for us. We started from ourselves and we relied on our own capability. We relied on ourselves and started from ourselves to serve ourselves, to serve the community and support each other.
Thank you so much, Halima. I really appreciate that. Chisara is such an unbelievable example of a success story, and I hope maybe not now, but I hope that before we're done, you could talk a little bit about how Chisara is able to operate in a context where refugees aren't recognized and where the right to education doesn't exist, and how you've been able to navigate that in Indonesia. Doesn't have to be at the moment, but I would love to hear a little bit about that. I know that there are efforts all over the place to make that happen, and what that next step is, how to become accredited, how to make sure that people who are graduating your programs are able to continue in their education and potentially use education as a tool to get to safety in other countries. Up next is Haiso Tako. I will let Haiso, I'll let you introduce yourself, and maybe if you could say a few words about your own specific context and what might be unique about it that others on the call might find interesting or important to know.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Teba. Good to see you again. Well, thank you to BUCC for organizing this. I did have privilege to also share the experience. Last year we have the World Refugee Day, and usually in World Refugee Day we have a lot of activities that we want to share to the world, and our experience and what we learn and our achievement as well. But this year it's very sad that we could not do, and for this I would like to also share to all of us about the refugee life and how the existence here has been for. So for many of us, probably we know that there are refugees in Thailand for more than 3 decades, and this still continuing, and usually the refugee camps in Thailand are physically confined. They don't live in the city, they don't live in the town, but basically they confine into a physical area where the movement of restrictions imposed, and basically they live in the refugee camp. So the refugee in Thailand where I work with is called the Korean Refugees Committee. Beside the Korean Refugees Committee, there are also other refugee camps, also known as the Korean Refugees Committee in the north of Thailand, and the Shan Refugees Committee. So there are several refugees camps, but it's now has been integrated to 9 to 10 refugees camps along the Thai-Burma border. So most refugees are coming from Thailand, and they fled back in early 1970s, and that's a long time ago. And they believe there. Some of them have resettled since the beginning of 2004, and we are grateful to the international agencies for the opportunity. And we're happy to know that more than 100,000 people has now returned for the last 10 years to 13 different countries. But there are still refugees in Thailand who could not resettle, and of course some are staying in process waiting for the applications to be approved, and many of them who could not who return to their country of origin and due to fear of persecutions, and still there are refugees who cannot be integrated into the local society, and even if they were born here. So basically refugee camps where I'm working for are people who are coming from Thailand, from Burma, and from all kind of ethnic backgrounds. They are not just only Korean people. There are Shan, Arakan, Mon, Chen, Gachen, and Rohingya, and all kinds of refugees from Burma since the last 30 years. And basically, we are working with the refugees. There are 5 main programs that we thought important to make sure that the refugee receive. One is very important program is education, and then followed by livelihood program. And we also experience a lot of social issues in refugee camp just to prolong existence. And that's why we also support to provide social support for refugee. And another program is the camp management, which basically refugee camps are run by the refugee. Of the camp's leaders, camp's committee are recruited from the refugee themselves, including the teachers and medic, and be trained by international worker. And the last program is the health program. We also run basic healthcare support in refugee camp, provide the support provided by international NGO. So as the community-based organizations, we coordinate, we collaborate with the international NGO who has been our long-term partners in providing services, especially in terms of funding, in terms of capacity building and life skill to the refugees. And we are very grateful to the commitment that they had been rendering to the refugees. And we see that a lot of refugees who are able to resettle to third country were able to rebuild their life. Wherever they are, they were able to reorganize themselves as a community and able to contribute to the society. And we see this is a great contributions that they have been received before while they are staying living in refugee camps. And that's where what I want to emphasize here from my experience is that even due to physical restrictions and restriction of movement and limited opportunity in education and livelihood, but as long as we empower the refugee to decide and to run their own program, and whether in terms of education, livelihood, and empowering them to lead their community, they are able to sustain themselves, and that's also where they are able to build confidence themselves, to make decisions, to make better decisions wherever they are. So in this World Refugee Day, I would like to also acknowledge the contributions from our partner. At the same time, continue to urge for your continued support and continue to empower the refugee leadership and meaningful participations in the development of the community wherever they are, and to the neighboring society where they live, so that they become a channel of blessings to the community where they are, and able to contribute back to the society. So I would like to also acknowledge the contribution of the refugee leaders, especially in the context where I'm working with. We have refugee leaders who have sacrificed their time, energy, and has not gone because of their stay. But we also continue to experience the importance of the refugee leadership to manage their own affair, daily affair, day-to-day affair in refugee camp. And for this, I would like to cherish, to acknowledge their contribution and leadership, despite of the opportunity, despite of many challenges they experience, but they still contribute and commit to the welfare of the fellow refugee while they are in the refugee camp. So I would like to end here, and I will be happy to have further conversations if time permit. Thank you very much, Themab. Hand over to you.
Hi, so it's always a pleasure to hear from you and to hear about how things are on the border. We can only imagine the stress and strain under the current circumstances in northern Thailand. One of the things that you mentioned, I think, is really quite interesting. I keep finding things where I'd love to have follow-ups, and I wish we were just sitting around having coffee, because you mentioned the role of refugees in running the services in the camp, education, etc. Traditionally, it's always been a top-down UNHCR, World Food Program, CARE International approach to structuring camps and how they work and how they function. But refugees have always set up alternate systems for themselves. If there is an opportunity at some point during our talk, I would love to hear a little bit more about how that's functioned there. Because we've seen, and we have Bernadette Yodo on the call who's worked in Uganda. We've seen, especially in Africa, a situation where camps have been very regulated by UN agencies. And people like yourself, refugees within the camps who do try to set up systems are very, very quickly disenfranchised of the opportunity to do that. So it'd be very interesting to hear if we have the opportunity to do that. But thank you so much for your presentation of your work and yourself. I appreciate it very much. Next, I'd like to turn to Lutfullah. Lutfullah, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm not sure that we've met before, but if you wouldn't mind just saying a few words about yourself and something about your experience and what you do that you think would be interesting or important for others on the call.
Yeah, thank you, Tamba. Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing great. Stay safe and healthy. Initially, I would like to thank those who have worked hard to conduct this event, and many thanks for giving me this chance to speak on behalf of refugees living with their families. My name is Lutfullah Baha. I'm from Afghanistan. I'm 23 years old. There are 5 of us in the family. I have been living in Thailand since 2019. Also, I'm working as an interpreter in 2 organizations here. As well as I'm working as a volunteer officer in UCC to serve for asylum seeker and refugees communities. Now I want to talk a little bit about the question that Tamba asked before. I honestly believe the most important thing or that other refugees should know about the experience I have had is while the refugee live in a very bad condition and always have to struggle for survival, they always have to wisely utilize the time they are stranded here, because otherwise they will be lodged behind by a lot when they get to the third countries. Therefore, I believe young refugees have to work hard to learn as much knowledge as possible. Middle-aged have to master or polish their skills. This is because all people have to look forward. If one is bothered too much by the current miseries, future intern countries will not lift them from these miseries they experience. Everyone has to look forward, even though in great pain. This is what we say, life has to go on regardless. Never get stuck up where you are, because time never returns, and therefore always be prepared for your new life tomorrow. It may necessarily come to be realistic, but at least you have to try on your part. Just be strong. If you are not defeated, nothing can defeat you. I know many people like to stack up in the miseries and can't get out. They tend to complain, but no one will listen to your complaint unless you are strong and undefeatable. Some people make an excuse. I don't have money. I don't have enough time. I don't have right people, and start blaming the situation. But everyone should break the chain of poverty and breaks the chain of excuses, because everything is possible if you really want to do it. And one thing else, which is really important as I experienced, and it's empowering me, is that we should never compare ourselves with others. Just compare our today with our yesterday. If there is any improvement, I think that's your achievement. That's all from my side. Thank you, Themba.
Thank you so much. I like that line, that about comparing yourself to others, and comparing to your yesterday, because your today might not always be better than your yesterday, but sometimes it is. And these, those of us who've been refugees certainly know it, and those of us who've been working with refugees know that this is an incremental process towards protection and towards better circumstances for people across the world who are forced into refugee situations. So I can really appreciate that. So thank you so much for your comments. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let me see who's next on the list. Zishan, it's been a while since I've seen you, but it's wonderful to have you on the call. I hope you're doing well. And I ask you the same that I've asked the others, just if you might just say a few words about your life and what you're doing, and what you think is unique of your experience in comparison to maybe some of the others on the call. We're very interested in making those new observations and those connections across people.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to say thank you to the Asia Pacific Refugee Rights and the BUCC to organize this beautiful program. So, well, my name is Zishan Joseph. So I am living here in the Bangkok, serving as a volunteer in the BRC, and also be the part of with BUCC team. So, well, as we are talking about the refugees' life, wherever they are existing in the world, I think our crisis, the problems, the fears, the tears, the pains, and frustrations, disappointments, it's almost similar. Everyone is facing almost a similar problems or crisis. So, well, by taking the opportunity of this special day, the Day of Refugee, the World Refugee Day, I would like to just give the encouragement through my experience. I want to share my conversation call with one of my friends. It's been a long time. And my friend, his father was died. I have attended the funeral ceremony, and after a few days, he made up me a call. And he said, my brother, life seems to be a colorless. Life seems to be a completely dark. Everything is stuck. I'm suffering in a very severe headache. I don't know what to do with my life. My father was the one who was responsible to take care of the home. But now the responsibility comes up to me after my father. I don't know how to deal with the situation. I just used a figurative psychological term. I said, okay, brother, do you have the graveyard quite near to your home? He said, yes, in the 5 minutes walking distance. I have. And then I said, do you have an axe or the iron rod at your home? He said, what are the things you're talking about? I said, please, can you listen to me? He said, yes, I do have the iron rod. And I said, please, can you take it and go to the graveyard and hit the people laid on in the graveyard? He got aggressive. He said, what are the things you are talking about? Are you crazy? I'm sharing with you the most concern of my life, that which I'm facing right now. And you're talking something stupid things. Okay, let's suppose if I take the rod and I go to the graveyard and hit the people laid down, the dead people. And if I cut them into the pieces, how they can feel the pain? They are dead people. And the people look around me and they think that I'm crazy. I said, sorry, I just want you to pick up the word, they are the dead people. This is what I want to realize you. See, you feel pain. You are suffering. You have the headache. You are in the frustration. He said, yes. I said, this is the sign. It's a sign of life. Struggle, pain, crisis, whatever. Do not compare the life with the word of comfort zone. Life does not mean it's the pleasures and the leisures. It's a combination of everything. Life is unpredictable. So we should prepare ourselves to face anything in our life. So being a refugee should not give up. Just move on and wait for the good times. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zishan. It's a dramatic story for sure, but moving, certainly, and I appreciate it. And it's true. The struggles are very, very real for everyone, and more present, I think, at certain times for some than others. I will move on now to our final panelist, Asadullah Amiri, who's living in Indonesia. Asadullah, it's a pleasure to have you with us on the call, and I hope that you're in good health, and I hope that you'll be able to tell us a little bit about your situation and what is unique about the experience of being perhaps a single refugee in Indonesia, that maybe others on the call would find illuminating in terms of that shared refugee experience.
Hello, sir. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk here. And I would like to send my greetings and love to the people who are hearing us and seeing us, so watching us. And I have heard many stories by many people here, and so which was great and really helpful and helping me. So I am Asadullah Amiri, an Afghan refugee, currently living in Makassar city in Indonesia. So I have came here in Indonesia in 2013, and I have been in 2 different detention center, twice in Makassar detention center, once in Balikpapan detention center. I have been 30 days in immigration office, under immigration office control. So I have seen many ups and downs here in Indonesia. So about my activity, I have been teaching English to refugees for 6 years, and have been teaching computer in a school which was made by volunteer teachers, refugee volunteer teachers here in Makassar city, just for 1 term. So the fact is that this is very nice and very great that we can talk about things which is positive and give people some hopes, but it is too difficult that everyone cannot be like that. You know, the situation that here that refugees are facing here nowadays in Indonesia, they are stuck in limbo. It is around 10 years that refugees are living in limbo here in Indonesia, and you know that they are not Indonesia is not a country of 1951 Convention Party, and the refugees have no rights, and they do not have even their basic rights, such as studying and marry, travel from one city to another city, holding a bank account, and many more. So it means that refugees are just here waiting for resettlement and doing nothing. They have lost their self-reliance, and the situation is very, very bad. And most of the refugees, it is around more than 7,000 refugees. I think they are under the support of IOM, and those who are under the support of IOM, they have experienced being in detention centers, and you may know that the detention centers here in Indonesia, it is not like camp. As you know, the refugee camp is intended to provide shelters for asylum seekers or refugees, for the people who escaped war and discrimination or violence. So, but here in Indonesia, it hasn't been like that. Refugees have have been detained for more than 2 years, 3 years, and 4 years. The refugees have experienced violence, torture, and so it is very difficult that we can say that do not think like that, and just be positive, think good things. Yes, that is good words. We have to be positive. We have to think good things and be so. But you know, most of the refugees in Indonesia, around more than half of refugees are from Afghanistan, and 99% of this refugee are Hazara nation, that they are facing genocide in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and now the refugees who are here from Hazara ethnic, and they are losing their family members back here in Afghanistan and Pakistan. So it is very, very difficult and challenging to be positive and to be very happy. Like, you know, that it is about 13 refugees have committed suicide here in Indonesia, and it is devastating. You know, it has a very negative impact on other refugees here. So UNHCR system is not clear, and the other countries who are offering resettlement, that they are seems to that they have forgotten refugees in Indonesia. Like, so all these things are giving hands to hands, and making the lives of refugees in Indonesia miserable, full of stress and frustration. It is very difficult. So yeah, many fellow refugees has told their own stories, and I also wanted to mention about the schools which is in Bogor, I think, which is about, I forgot the name. So you know that there are refugees in more than 7 different states in Indonesia. So Jakarta or Bogor is just one of that, and most of the refugees does not have access to these schools, and in Makassar city, Batam, and other states that, which is far from Jakarta, they are completely deprived of their rights, their freedom, and they are not even they have curfew. They have curfew. They have to be present to their accommodation at 10 p.m. up to 6 a.m. in the morning. So it is very difficult for refugees. I hope this long waiting and this crisis has come to an end one day. And I just told these things that the other people who are listening this broadcast, maybe now or tomorrow from other channels, they can be aware of the other side, that the situation in Indonesia, the refugees who are facing the challenges, the problems, and it is not just there are just very least number of refugees who are active, like Halima, like other friends who talked here today, but most of the refugees, they are very frustrated, very exhausted, tired, and if the situation goes the same as it is, I am afraid that the number of victims will rise, and I don't know what will happen next, and it will be terrible. And yeah, it was my story. Thank you for.
Thank you so much.
There is no question. Yeah.
I think you've touched on so many important issues, and I'm really surprised that we're 1 hour and 45 minutes into this call, and this is the first mention of detention, because detention is such a reality for refugees, not just in this region around the world. And I mean, here in the United States, as well as in Europe, as in the Middle East and Africa, detention is the reality. And detention centers are so often hidden from public view. They're often privatized. They're money-making enterprises. They're not regulated. People in detention are not afforded the protection of criminals because criminal law is a separate legal system. So there can be arbitrary detention without end. And I know many of you know this, but refugees who live in urban centers often fear any encounter with authority because of detention, and that can create an unbelievable stress. Those asylum seekers or refugees who are in detention, of course, suffer the consequences of that. I mean, you've mentioned the high rates of suicide, the severe mental health concerns around that detention, the realization that your life has effectively come to a standstill while your family may still be at risk back home, being unable to communicate to your friends and relatives, being unable to know what the processes are that you're moving through, if you're moving through a process. And, you know, we have a number of questions, you know, that Bakir and I worked out, but what I'd like to do now is thank all of you for sharing your stories, but follow up on a couple of them. And Asadullah, maybe I'll start with you since you've just spoken. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges of mental health, because we don't talk at all about this in the NGO sphere so much. I mean, there are programs that focus on psychosocial support and counseling, but they're very, very minor. Usually it's, you know, education programs, which is a psychosocial support structure, of course, but dealing with things like trauma, dealing with things like isolation, with that detention. Can you talk a little bit about how, if you're willing, how you've dealt with that, or how you've seen refugees deal with that, and what we could learn from each other about how best to progress in that regard?
Yeah, about mental health, I can say there you cannot find any refugees in Indonesia. I don't have any other experience from refugees in other part of the world, but here in Indonesia, as I have the experience of being in different cities in Bogor, in Jakarta, Makassar, and Balikpapan, as I have seen many refugees, and I have contact with lots of refugees in all over the cities in Indonesia. You cannot find any refugee with a very good health, mental health. I can say that every refugee has a kind of mentally sick here, you know, because they have seen many difficulties and problems in detention centers and outside. When you are in detention center, you are saying, when the officers are treating with you, when they are talking to you, when they are watching you, all are just torturous and humiliating. Like, you know, I have experienced it in 3 times in detention centers, and many more refugees have experienced the same. So in immigration offices, when the refugees first want to register themselves, and then they have been completely torturing, beaten up the refugees. When we arrived there was the bench set in rows, and they were making refugees to lie on the chest and cross under the crow on the chest under the bench, and like that they were making refugees to go to do push-ups, running like that. It was a kind of punishing and torturing. So that has a very negative and bad impact on refugees. From another side, there is not peace in their home country and their family members are in danger. So it also put pressures on refugees, and the treatment of UNHCR most of the times makes refugees more stressed and frustrated. They are when they despite they know that there is not any secure place, peaceful place in Afghanistan. They are saying that if you can think that there is a peace, there is a peaceful place in your country, you can go back. Yeah, it happened that in 2014, when the first time when they revealed these things, and they told the refugees in Medan that if you can go back, if you can find any peaceful place in Afghanistan, we help you to go back because you are not vulnerable. Refugees committed suicide after that day. That one day after that day that they announced that news that you are not, most of you will not be vulnerable, and you have to make the decision. If there is a safe place in Afghanistan, we help you to return back. So these things are giving hand to hand and making the refugees frustrated and unhealthy mentally. So the only way that the people can be better is that just giving them a hope. You know, that I don't know how it happens, but I think it is the only way.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the candidness of your answer and your willingness to talk about a subject that, as Nibras has pointed out in the chat, is so often not discussed. I think for those of us in the refugee advocacy NGO world, there's talk about vicarious trauma and how to deal with our mental health working with refugees, but there's so often a complete silence when it comes to discussing the mental health that's needed, that the attention to mental health that's needed for refugees themselves. Masuma, do you have a question? I see that your hand is raised.
Hi everyone, this is Masuma. I'm talking from Sydney, Australia. And first of all, I will not say happy Refugee Day, because being a refugee is not a choice to choose to be a refugee. It's a force to be a refugee. It's you can say it's the only option that you have to choose to be a refugee. Which is the day to day. I'm really happy to be in this event and joining you all. And I'm really obsessed and very agree with Asadullah's comments wherever he was sharing with us and the other refugees that they are here with us today. And we have Haiso from, as he is our receiving member of EPNOR, Asia Pacific Network of Refugees. And we had Hafsar as well. So I'm glad and happy to be here. But my comment is that with being obsessed, and I agree with Asadullah's comments, these are the really and the realistic points that he brings up, and that is the realistic comments. And whatever the situation is happening with refugees in all over the world, that is the reality which should be come up, which should be pointed out, we have to talk always about that, which is unfortunately hiding. And I'm really glad to be in this part, and as a being member of Asia Pacific Network of Refugees, the only region which we are working with 9 Asian countries. I can name that Australia, Indonesia, Malaysia. We are working with Iran, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Japan, Thailand, which our office based there. So I'm really happy to be here, and I want you guys to be in touch with us as well. So I have shared EPNOR's email address. Please be in touch with us. And EPNOR is a platform that it's made by refugee all of the refugees are working, and we are here for refugees. So I really want to raise this thing up. Very, very soon we're gonna have our refugee education empowers refugee campaign, which is we are running, and the event gonna be very soon. We will announce it. You can have a look to our website. I will share it on the chat box. That is www.refugee.apnor organization, and I will share it on the chat box. And I want you to have a look and see to our journey as being a group of refugees and having refugees with us. And I want you to be in touch with us and be in a group of us. I want you to share whatever you're being through or suffering or having or whatever is the realities and the situations, the problems, the issues are happening with refugees. I want you to share with APNOR a team and group and be a member of our family. I mean, and I'm really glad of Bakir that he asked us to be part of this event. I'm really happy that I joined today, and very glad to meet you, wonderful people, and having you with us. So I don't want to take your time. Just want you to be, you can join us, and I shared APNOR's email address. I really recommend you guys to be a part of our family. Thank you so much, and thank you for your time to hearing me.
Thank you, Masuma. We have a new comment in the chat box, but first I'll go to Muzaffar. For those of you who are not yet familiar with APNOR, it is certainly worth checking them out. They're doing excellent work in the region. But Muzaffar, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Themba, and thank you very much to some familiar voices and friends that I have personally met or I have been privileged to work. Lutfallah Baha, I saw, and also Asadullah Amiri. Really pleased to hear your thoughts. And Joseph, I'm very pleased to meet you all and hear you. I just want to comment on Asadullah's remarks about detention center, the mental health. I think they are very critical issues that often, as you said, Themba, are gone unnoticed or it's not talked or discussed a lot. I just want to say that Chisarwa Learning is partnering with United Nations Human Rights Office in Geneva to offer psychosocial support to the community who are who has the survival of torture. So we think education is one way that we can support each other. And when we say we, it means the refugees themselves. So as an organization, we strongly believe that refugees have the components and the agency that they can support each other. I totally agree with Asadullah. You said it's really hard to keep oneself positive in an extremely challenging situation. I have been refugee, and I see my village is running is occupied by the Taliban yesterday, and how they're burning people's home and people are leaving their home and taking refuge on the mountains. So I would say on this Refugee Day that UNHCR might have more refugees in not far future, because the Taliban are getting stronger and they are getting more grounds and more people are being displaced from their home. And the experience they're facing is probably for many of them for the first time they're leaving their homes. And the torture and trauma they're experiencing is mostly goes unnoticed. But what another a point you really mentioned validly, Asadullah, that the vulnerable, who is vulnerable. I think this is not the right of any organization and any individual to say you are not vulnerable. I think this is vulnerability criteria is in modern terms, we can say you are vulnerable or not, but who is going to quantify that? Who is going to prove that one is vulnerable or not? I think compelling individuals and refugees to prove themselves more vulnerable is a way to take their agency away from them. I think we are more powerful and we have more agency to be we are more resilient. These comments come from the luxury offices who just with a couple of sentences they declare that he's not vulnerable. But we see the most of the suicide incidents, which Asadullah said 14 incidents has happened since past many years, comes from the single male, which are considered that they are not vulnerable. I think this is very serious events that the organizations such as UNHCR, IOM, and other relevant organizations should keep in their mind that who are vulnerable, and they have to rethink about that. And many of these single male are looking healthy, but many of them are separated from their families. Their children are growing up from away from them. So that's very important point that you raised, Asadullah. I'm not going to comment more about other issues, but I would really love to hear from the strong words from the refugees who are going through the current refugee experience. So thank you very much, everyone, for sharing your thoughts. And it gives a lot of insight to think about. And I think there needs a lot to be worked on the policy level, because every policy is designed to put more trauma on refugees. Thank you.
Muzaffar, every comment that on this panel is raising so many new questions and points, and I think that you've pointed at a completely new thread of discussion. And I do hope that if it's not carried on today, that we do continue to think about it. And that is the idea of vulnerability of single refugee males too, because there is certainly that vulnerability, and there's sort of a taboo that I've seen around discussing that. So I'm very appreciative that you've raised that. I see, Asadullah, you've got your hand up. Please, if you want to respond to Muzaffar, please do. There's also a comment for you that's in the chat box, and if you don't mind, maybe perhaps referencing that as well. It's basically saying, you know, someone who's working in an NGO who's with us today is saying, you know, we run a counseling support project for refugees in Hong Kong. Most refugees have been there for many years, as refugees are in so many countries. How can people who are helping to provide that support, counseling support, how can they meaningfully help people when there's so few, there's so little hope for change in some ways? That how do you beat that despair when you don't see the government reacting, when you don't see the policies changing? How do you maintain a good solid progress in support?
Yeah, thank you, sir. And first of all, to Mr. Muzaffar, I just spoke about my experience. I'm not saying that so. And yeah, we have to give up or like that. So yeah, we are strong. I am doing my own things. I am exercising every day. I am reading books. I am studying, and so many other refugees are doing the same things. Yeah, we can overcome the situation, and that by the help of people, good people who can hear we have to share our real story. When there is an opportunity, we have to talk about everything. So what I want to request from fellow refugees is that whenever there is a chance to talk anywhere, you have to talk about the situation that you are in, about not just about the activities that you are doing. You have to raise your voice, and that the people can hear your voice and learn about your situation and condition that you are in. So, and about the counseling that you mentioned, sir, it is I think the only thing we have experienced some counseling meetings like that that was provided by IIM somehow, and it wasn't helpful. So the only thing which is so helpful is that our voice is raised. It means the people can help us, that we can raise our voice. The world can, and the world can be aware of our story, our situation. So this is very difficult. You know, the time that Australia has closed the border and they promised UNHCR to take refugees from Indonesia. Then they announced that they are not accepting refugees who are entered after July 2014 in Indonesia. So why? What is changed for refugees? So they have not crossed the border. They stayed in Indonesia. They have escaped war and conflict and danger to come here. And what is changed for them, that they are not 2013 and they are 2014? Are they not human, or they do not have the right to refuge like that? So this kind of things has happened in Indonesia, and they make the refugees more miserable and frustrated. So I think the only thing that can help refugees in Indonesia is just helping to raise their voice and helping them that their voice can be heard by resettling by the countries who are offering this settlement. This was my edit. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Asadullah. I think that one thing that I've seen in terms of that type of mental health support or that type of sort of solidarity that can build protection against the risks that come from being a refugee is efforts to build community and break down the walls between people, whether it's refugees or whether it's refugees and a host community. And I want to switch now to Halima, if you don't mind, Halima, because I think that one of the tools that I've seen being successful, and Bakir, you're free to speak up too if you want, around the refugee school that you're running in Thailand. But one of the things that I've seen working in terms of building community is refugee education, and that can help to bring people together in a way. It's not directly psychosocial support, but it certainly does support mental health and any number of other things. It's not just education. And I'm wondering if Halima, you could talk a little bit about the question I asked earlier about how do you create that type of environment in a state that doesn't allow you to do that? And also if you've seen positive steps and progress through that in terms of refugees' capacities to deal with the challenges they face every day. And this gets a little bit to a point in the chat from Nibras about World Refugee Day not just being about airing concerns and talking about problems, but discussing solutions and ways forward. So if you don't mind, I'd like to hand the floor to you for a little while.
Thank you again. Regarding the point that mentioned by Asadullah, I agree that the mental issue is one of the very important things of refugee lives. Even though the number of people who we serve them through the school is a less number, it's not covering all the refugees of Indonesia, but at least this is what we can do for the surrounding people around us. In the school, at the beginning, we started by a small number of children, but during the time, more people with the more skills and knowledge came forward to serve the community. As I mentioned before, school is not just about delivering school subjects to the children. Also, older people and teenagers and young people can come to school. During the time we expanded the activities that can be done from the channel of the school. For example, we have sport activities, we have music classes We have computer classes. And sometimes we also, by the help of the people, the network that we made around the world, we are able to conduct some workshop and training for the teachers, for the children, and also for the parents who are involved with the school. And as I said before, I know that mental issue is very important thing. Even though my colleagues who are involved with something positive inside the school, all the time we need them to motivate my colleagues. We need them to be still hopeful about the future. I remember 3 years ago, we had to send all the teachers for 2 months holiday, just to give them some time to rest, because the pressure of refugee lives was too much on the people. Sometimes people have to go to UNHCR for protest, or sometimes sitting in this street to get accommodation and shelter. All of these things affect on the teachers as well. So anyone in the community, anyone in refugee community is affected by the difficulties of being a refugee. So imagine how the life can be difficult for the people who are not involved in positive things like education and being in a group or being a part of the community. I'm not sure if I could answer your question, if anything is not clear yet.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I see that Asadullah has raised a hand again. I don't know, Asadullah, if you would like to respond.
As mentioned, that the school is not just for children; it is for elders as well. So that is great, but it can help the refugees just in a very small, just a particular area. And as I mentioned before, that there is more than 7 states in Indonesia that refugees are there, and they do not have access to education. And also, as a family member, I am not a family refugee here. I'm a single refugee, but as I was in contact with them and I saw them, I was once teaching in the school that I saw. I realized that the only problem for the children here is not just lack of education. I think the situation, the condition, in the home or in the accommodation is another challenge for children than school. Yeah, you know, the frustration and the anxiety that their parents have, it directly affects on the children because they are small. And I have seen many small children, they are talking about UNHCR, about interview, about police, immigration, like that. So now this is the time for them to play. This is the time for them to enjoy it. This is the time for them to study or to learn something, but they are thinking like elders. They are thinking about being recital. They are thinking about UNHCR or stuff like that. So I think education is not just the big issue for the family members and for family refugees. The situation and the condition which has a negative impact on their children, I think it is a bigger issue than lack of education. And another thing is about the women. The problems about you know that women has been the more deprived people in our community, in our society back in Afghanistan, and also here they are facing the same problem here. And in 24 hours they are all the time in the homes, in the accommodation, that the very crowded accommodation, and that they cannot even go out of their room easily. It is I think it is a big challenge for the women. this is the problems of family refugees that I think it was necessary that to be raised here. And yeah, thanks again for giving me the opportunity to talk. I think the time is.
We're getting close.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's quite late here in New York. So I'll close with one final question, and I think that I keep reading in the chat the comment from Nibras about solutions, and this is something that Bakir and I also talked about as we were talking about how to run the panel. That it's not just so much about telling stories. We hear stories all the time. Everyone has a story, and they are all valid and very difficult stories. But the next step is really the important one. How do we create a system? How do we create a pathway for real protection, real enjoyment of fundamental rights that already exist in law, but are not being provided to people? How do we create the networks that we need to create? How do we each, with our individual contributions, help to make that happen? Those of us who aren't refugees, those of us who are, those of us who are less educated, those of us who are more educated, those of us who are female, those of us who are male. How do we bring all of this together? And the way that I've seen it actually work, and I've worked in this field for, I don't know, almost 2 decades. The way that I've seen it work is when it's refugee-led, when it's led by the communities that are affected, by refugees and by the hosting communities working together. And so for a final question, I promised myself that I wanted to come back to Haiso about refugee leadership in the camps. And I wonder, Haiso, if you could say a little bit about how you've managed to run some of the fundamental services that are needed in northern Thailand for refugees there, and how you've been able to engage. I know there are a lot of refugees on the call, but there are also a lot of NGO people here. How you've been able to engage positively with NGOs so that NGOs will step back and provide refugees the space to make the decisions about that are directly affecting their lives. And after this, we'll go to the closing statement by Janine from Apron, and I will let her take over from there. So I'd like to take this opportunity also to say thank you all so much for being here. Haiso, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Teba. I think the context, the refugee context in Thailand is quite unique. And I have to acknowledge that during the formations, the establishment of refugee camp in Thailand, the contributions from the refugee themselves have to be acknowledged. And that's what we experienced, that the refugee leadership within the refugee camp itself continue to sustain despite of many challenges in terms of funding and restrictions movement. And so when the refugee camps were set up, a lot of the time near my border, the refugee themselves see the importance of the refugee leadership. And that's when they organize themselves into community, they organize themselves into civil society, community-based organizations such as youth, such as women and students, you know. And for example, the refugee educations that we are running, the school are basically run by the refugee themselves, who actually came and brought their own education system. And one important thing here is we have to acknowledge what they have, and we have to acknowledge what they want and what they want to see their future for the children, even if they live in the refugee camp. So we learn to acknowledge the contributions, the desire, and the hope that they want to establish for their children. And I think that's the key point, that despite of many challenges, the school system, the refugee leaderships continue to run and by themselves, and whether in terms of teachers, medic, camp leaders. And by saying this, it doesn't mean also that they have the 100% right to also make decisions at the policy level. As I mentioned earlier, the restriction of movements and the legal status, lack of legal status also prohibit them from many ways to actively engage in the in the discussions, the policy level. So we are still working on it, and we are grateful to the formations of the ABNOR to also serve as a platform for refugees have more space to participate at the policy level. So this is, I think it's important, and I want to send this to all of us. And as we have also discussions about the challenges and issues that are running and happening in refugee camp, I also would like to acknowledge this and the contributions of the refugee leaderships, whether instead of the solving the problem, social problem, and strengthen refugee leadership so that they have a dignified life, even if they are still remain as refugee. So thank you very much, Teva, once again for the opportunity.
I guess that's me. Well, thank you everybody for staying with us. It was a wonderful presentation. I'm going to keep this brief, bearing in mind that we're running a little over and it's quite late in New York for Themba. But first I want to thank Bakir at the Bangkok Urban Community Club for bringing us all together and assembling this wonderful panel of speakers who shared their stories and knowledge with us, as well as to congratulate him on becoming the new Deputy Chair of the Refugee Leadership and Participation Working Group at the Asia Pacific Refugee Rights Network. I think this event today is testimony to his abilities and the promise he brings to that role. I'd also like to thank Themba Lowis at Borderless 360, currently in New York, for staying up so late with us and participating in such an important event and asking those important questions. So thank you. To the panelists and speakers, thank you so much for sharing your remarkable stories of not only courage and hope, but also of the harsh, uncomfortable reality of the everyday lives of refugees, so poignantly shared by Asadullah Amiri, and made so much more remarkable in these unprecedented times of global health concerns and conflicts in the Asia Pacific region that have transnational and regional impacts that tend to further undermine the dignity and rights of refugees and asylum seekers. These stories of perseverance in the face of great difficulty shared with us today by Hafsar, Musafar, and Salai Thomas, I hope, will serve to help others by bringing comfort, solace, and hope to those going through similar circumstances, and spur, hopefully, movements that bring meaningful change to the lives of refugees. I'd like to particularly recognize Hafsar, who had to leave earlier due to prior commitments, but to congratulate her on being elected just last week as the new chair of the Asia Pacific Refugee Rights Network. We are looking very forward to her leadership over the coming years. And finally, thank you to the Apron staff, Newt and Rachel, for your help during this event. And with that, thank you all for joining us today, and have a wonderful rest of your day or your evening, wherever you may be. Take care.
Thanks all for joining, all for supporting this event, especially Themba. I hope you, now is morning for you. It's too late. Have a great day. Yeah.
I see so many familiar faces. I hope to see you soon in Bangkok or Jakarta or wherever, or in New York. So thank you all very much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Everybody,
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bakir. Thank you, Themba.
Thank you.